Happy Monday morning. There is no time to waste today. We've kind of got a special episode that I want to do today because over the weekend, we've been learning a lot about what's about to come out about the North American trade tariffs that are going to be added to our businesses starting tomorrow, Tuesday, February 4th. So, recording this today on Monday, February 3rd. Over the weekend, we found out that we are going to be seeing a new tariff slash tax or customs fee, however you want to describe it. They're describing it as a tariff on the news, 25% coming from Canada and Mexico. So if you are producing goods in Canada or Mexico, you will now be seeing a new 25% tariff on top of everything that you are importing into the United States. We are also seeing an additional 10% tariff being put on anything coming in from China. So I want to break this down a little bit. If you've been watching the news, they are explaining this actually really, really well, where essentially what this means is that when your goods from any of these three countries, or really from any country in the world, when your goods hit the port in the United States, the US Customs Department is going to evaluate what your goods are. They're going to look at all of your documentation, which needs to be accurate, by the way. So make sure that you're doing all of your correct documentation or asking your manufacturer to do so. And what they're going to do is review everything, and then they're going to send you a bill. They're going to send you an invoice and say, your customs fees for importing this amount of goods, which is this good, and it's got this duty rate and this tax and this tariff, is X amount of dollars. And then you, as a company, are going to have to pay the US Customs Department that invoice. Now, it's going to be up to you as to whether you as a business can absorb these costs until maybe we see things change again. We don't know how long these tariffs will last. We did see something a week or so ago where a tariff was implemented on Colombia, but then it was revoked actually within the same 24 hours. So this one looks like it will be a little bit more permanent and a little bit more long term. But we're all learning a lot as we go. And so there are definitely some different ways that you can come at this. Number one, I want you to understand that this is normal. Duty fees coming from any country in the world is normal. So a few years ago, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, I can't even remember now, but there was an additional tariff put on goods coming in from China. It ranged from 7 to 15%, I think, depending on the goods that you were actually importing. And so what we saw, I want to use like a really good example that I'm super familiar with. So I'm a cycling apparel nerd. My background is in cycling apparel at the time. I knew for sure that importing a men's cycling jersey with a full zipper made of synthetic fibers. So all of this stuff goes into the classification of what you're going to have to pay in the way of duty rate. So I want you to be aware of that. There's a website you can go to find all those percentages and all of the different codes that you need. But in order to import a men's cycling jersey made of man-made fibers with a full center front zipper from China to the United States before this extra tariff was added was already at 32%. So for us to make this garment in China, the reason that we were willing to pay almost a third in our customs fees was because we were getting such good pricing on these items from China in the first place. So there's a cost of living difference, there's an hourly wage difference, and even when you're working with very ethical, sustainable, blue sign, like highly regulated factories in those areas, you can still get very good costing because of so many different factors that go into the way that things work in different countries compared to ours. And so when we were importing those goods, it was 32%. So when it hit the US port, we would get a bill that said, okay, now you owe 32% of this goods to us to import it into the United States. So at the time when that additional tariff was added, we actually went in and tried to do some negotiation with our factory. So this is an example where the importer and the exporter might consider to split this new tariff. That's something you can talk to your manufacturer about. They might say, no way, we can't afford that. Some manufacturers might say, hey, you're a big enough customer for us, so we're willing to split this new fee. And we're going to make sure that you get your goods. And so maybe you can split it right down the middle at 12.5% or something like that, or ask them to pay 10% and you're going to pay 15, whatever it might be. You might be able to have that discussion with any manufacturers that you currently have right now importing from Mexico, Canada, or from China. So I know that's conversations that people are having. I don't know how much success everyone is having. We had a little bit of success where we were able to split some of that fee, but it wasn't as high as we wanted it to be. So again, there's a lot of discussion that you should have. Everything comes down to communication. So anyway, that additional tariff went on top of the 32%. It didn't replace it. So now we were looking at paying, I think if we were at 15%, 47% now of our men's cycling jersey, 47% of that cost of the garment was going to be charged to us to be able to import it into the US. And this was a time where we saw a lot of people really reconsidering whether or not they wanted to manufacture in China. And I know that it was meant to really bring new business into the US. And one of the issues that we tend to see here in the US is that while we do have manufacturers, there are several of them in several different states, and you can localize your manufacturing. What we tend to see, or what we tend to have trouble with, is finding US manufacturers that can handle extremely large production capacities. So what do I mean by that? I mean, usually if you're manufacturing in the US, you can get anywhere from a couple hundred units to a couple thousand units, no problem. But if you're a big company and you need to order hundreds of thousands of units on a really tight timeline, we don't tend to see the production capacity in the US that allows for that. So either that needs to grow and change, or people who are ordering that much in the way of their goods are going to have to figure out how to start paying these additional tariffs. And a lot of times, especially this is what the news is telling you too, a lot of times they are going to pass off that extra fee to you as the customer. So we are potentially seeing a lot of our goods go up in price. Now, this is across the board. When we first saw this come across the news, I had seen a particular report that was actually listing out certain segments and certain goods. And I thought maybe we're going to see it where the fashion and the apparel industry actually isn't going to get hit with this new tariff. And so I started to dig in and do my research. And what the news was really doing was just trying to amplify like the industries that are going to hit us the hardest. So if they were mentioning like oil and gas, is because our gas prices might go up. And if they were mentioning like steel and cars, it's because the cost of our cars might start to go up. And so they felt like that was the biggest factor in what's going to be hitting the American public. The more that I dug into it, the more I realized that they are actually planning to tax and put this additional tariff on everything coming in from these three countries. So going back to my example of the men's cycling jersey, where it was at 47% to be able to import it last week, now it's going to be 57% to import it. So again, another bump there. I think we're going to see a lot of people continue to reconsider whether or not China is still the right place for them. Now, that being said, so even if we went back 10 years, importing that cycling jersey from China would have still cost us 32% to pay that duty rate to import it into the US. So the 25% duty rate that's now being imposed on Mexico and Canada is still quite a bit lower than what we would have even seen in what I'll call like the olden times, what we would have even seen a decade ago coming in from China. It's just very different because for the longest time, we've been able to take advantage of NAFTA and CAFTA agreements. So the North American Free Trade Agreement has basically said that if you are importing goods from Canada or Mexico into the US, you pay 0% duty fees. And a lot of people have chosen to work in these regions because 0% on top of your cost is a huge savings when you're thinking about what you're now going to have to pay. Of course, so if your garment costs $10 coming from the factory in Mexico, now you're also going to be paying an additional $2.50 to import it into the US. So now your cost isn't just $10 plus shipping fees, now it's $12.50 plus shipping fees. And that might not make or break you. You might decide that extra $2.50, no big deal, no problem. We're going to absorb that as a company, or my customer can definitely absorb that. But I want you to remember that for every dollar that you add in cost to your units that you want to sell to a customer, you probably need to multiply that by 5 in your retail to make sure that your business still has healthy margins. And that's why we as consumers tend to see such big rate hikes, because for companies to remain profitable in a way that's healthy, it's not just a direct correlation. So all of a sudden this $250 becomes an additional $10 at retail to my customer. And if I was already selling, $100 pair of leggings or $120 cycling jersey, let's stick with the subject here, $120 cycling jersey, maybe now, that extra $10 puts them over the limit. Or maybe it's just not something that all of a sudden they're willing to consider. Maybe we've done a ton of consumer research and we've maxed out their price ability. So $120 was the maximum that they were ever willing to pay for a cycling jersey. And now we've just exceeded that. So these are the kinds of things that a lot of businesses are going to have to consider when either changing their pricing to their customer or absorbing these costs and figuring out whether they can take it on their bottom line. So there is one other thing that I want to touch on today really quick. So there used to be a loophole in some of these customs and duty fees. And I know that we were talking about this a little bit in my last corporate role, where if we were creating, like, let's say a team order. So again, in the cycling world, if Mike's Bikes came to us and said, we want to create a team order. We want our entire team to be outfitted in jerseys, bib shorts, arm warmers, knee warmer, you name it. We need to get it from you. It needs to have our logos on it. We're going to distribute it to our team. And that order had cost less than, I think this year the threshold was $800. At the time, I think it was $600. So if that order costs less than $800 to ship directly to Mike's Bikes team manager from the factory in China, you don't pay duty rate fees on that. And that's how a lot of different companies, and I'm going to name like Temu and Shine, have been able to actually ship directly to customers from their facilities without having to pay these extra duty fees or these extra customs fees. They've actually found this loophole, and that's how you're getting goods shipped to you directly from China without those prices going up. This loophole is being closed. So this loophole that a lot of people have been able to take advantage of to boost the bottom line of their business is going away. So if you have been in the business trying to figure out how to make this loophole work for you or work for your customers, I want you to know that this is on the table to be removed starting tomorrow as well. And so that's another big thing if that's been a big key piece of your business model. So a lot might be changing here over the next couple of months, years. We're going to wait and see what exactly happens and transpires from this. I will tell you, we have had more people reach out to us and ask about US manufacturing in the last month or two than we ever have before. And again, I just want to reiterate that unless you are a small company and you can take small units at a time, this is going to be a really big, difficult time for you. And so I want you to be considering what things you could be doing. Hopefully you listened to our podcast episode not too long ago where we talked about tariffs, and we were recommending that people start bringing in inventory or bringing in fabrics now and just holding on to them in case this happened. And so hopefully you have a little bit of like backstock, or hopefully you have some goods already on hand that you didn't have to pay these goods for, these extra tariffs on those goods for. But if you didn't, I want you to know that this is absolutely manageable. Again, this is very familiar in the world of importing goods. This is normal. It's just not normal necessarily for us to be imposing these kinds of tariffs in the North America regions. So we will wait and see if this expands to any of the CAFTA regions. So Central America is another area right now that we are not hearing any new tariffs about. So if you are based in El Salvador, Honduras, Colombia, you are still safe with a 0% duty rate at the moment. And then, of course, you're safe if you're manufacturing in the US. If you have any more questions on this, please let me know. I'm doing as much research as fast as I can. I wanted to get this information to you today in hopes that you have all of it before tomorrow. Please send comments. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think. And good luck. Let's all work together to figure out how to kind of move through this. And if we need to petition our senators and petition our government to get rid of this, let's do that too. Okay, let's activate. Let's do good things for our industry and for the world and for our consumers. Okay, Have a great Monday. Talk to you soon.